Welcome back to The Lead. The world lead. Everyone who tried to run, they killed them. That is one of the shocking eyewitness accounts of the U.S. Special Forces raid in Yemen, the first major military engagement of Donald Trump's presidency. The Intercept's Iona Craig went to the site of the gun battle and wrote that the village was nearly obliterated. Dozens of civilians, men, women, and children killed. Buildings demolished and bullets raining from above. The Intercept's Iona Craig joins me in just a moment. Of course, the White House has said that the operation in which Navy SEAL Ryan Owens died was a great success, and anyone who questions the success of this raid, including John McCain, does a disservice to his memory. CNN's Barbara Starr is live at the Pentagon. Barbara, a U.S. commander is now saying that this mission is on him, but the military still is telling a very different story. Isn't that right?
Well, they are, Jim, and I don't really think it's very surprising. We've seen this very often in the past when there are firefights, when there are confrontations in frontline war zones, if you will. Often the military has a view of what happened, and civilians on the ground have very credible eyewitness reports of what they say happened to them. In this case, this SEAL raid in Yemen in late January has continued to be controversial. The top commander saying he accepts responsibility, that civilians died, that a Navy SEAL died, but he tried to explain why he believes there was no misconduct.
When I go through these things, there are some specific things that I am looking for. I am looking for information gaps where we can't explain what happened in a particular situation, or we have conflicting information between members of the organization. I'm looking for indicators of incompetence or poor decision making or bad judgment throughout all of this. So what I can tell you is that we did an exhaustive after-action review on this. I presided over that. It was, to me, it went down to a level that included people who were on the specific objective. As a result of that, I was satisfied that none of those indicators that I identified to you were present.
Now, the Navy SEALs, U.S. military forces, did not remain on the ground in Yemen, so they have only been able to come to some judgments, some assessments about what they think happened. They say they went into this village to raid a compound looking for al-Qaeda intelligence. They were opened up on fire from all sides, multiple directions. Their assessment is that it is likely the villagers, some villagers, plus al-Qaeda, took up arms against them. They believe the villagers probably thought that they were rival tribal factions. There had been fighting in the area in the past, and that maybe their village that night was being invaded somehow by some rival factions. That's an assessment that they have come to. It may never be exactly known exactly what happened. Jim.
All right, Barbara Starr, thank you. Joining me now is The Intercept's Iona Craig. Iona, as we just heard, the general in charge of this said no bad decisions were made in the Yemen raid. You were on the ground there. Tell us what you know.
Well, certainly from the evidence that I saw, there was all three of those categories were filled. There was poor decision-making, bad judgment, and incompetence. I think to start with, even carrying out this raid without fully understanding that every single man within hearing distance of a gunshot, within hearing distance of a helicopter was going to come running, because of the current context of the Civil War, they believed that they were coming to running to fight not Americans, but Houthis, who, by the way, the Americans are also supporting supporting the Saudis to fight against at the moment. So they did believe that their village was being raided, but not by rival tribes. They believed it was being raided by the Houthi Saleh forces, who they've been fighting against, since 2014. Yeah. So I don't think, I mean, that was a clear sign of bad judgment. Secondly, to then continue the raids when they knew that they were compromised. They knew that the people inside the village had a heads up that they were coming, possibly Al-Qaeda even knew that they were coming, but still they decided to carry on the mission. I think that would be a poor decision. And then to call strafing an entire village with helicopter gunship fire incompetence is probably something of an understatement, but that clearly happened, and that's what I saw from the ground.
And Iona, a Pentagon spokesman would not specifically respond to your article. I think that's right, but they are strongly defending this decision to call in those airstrikes because they say the SEALs were pinned down. What do you make of that claim?
The SEALs, as I mentioned, were pinned down because men in the village did come to fight, because they didn't know they were fighting Navy SEALs. They didn't know they were going to have helicopter gunship fire raining down on their village as a consequence of doing that. But what they hit during that strafing of the village was civilians. I spoke to a 5-year-old boy who described running from that helicopter gunship fire as he was shot at from behind as he ran with his mother, and his mother was subsequently killed. And there were more than a dozen buildings that I walked into that had been hit or destroyed by those helicopters and airstrikes.
And Iona, I just wanted to ask you, because you tell us what you think you observed and brought back from this story, but I mean, just being there on the ground and looking at the scene, what did you see? What would you tell our viewers and people about what you saw there? Was this a massacre?
Yeah, these were devastated civilians. These were families, many of whom have now left the village, and that raid that night was not the end. The village has been routinely bombed now since the 1st of March, 4 continuous nights of both drone strikes and more helicopter gunship fire that killed another 2 children earlier this week, that killed another 3 adults. So these are very angry people. And
there is there's obviously an anti-American sentiment there. Are you concerned that they weren't telling you the truth? What do you make of that?
There wasn't an anti-American sentiment before this raid happened. There absolutely wasn't. And even the head of the village, Sheikh Aziz Al-Amri, he was quite clear that the revenge will come from God and not from him. But a lot of them were had a lot of anti-American sentiment after what happened. Beforehand, they had no intention of fighting America, the men that I spoke to. But afterwards, yes, because their women and children had been killed in that raid.
A fascinating look at that story. Iona Craig, thank you so much for being on the ground there and reporting what you saw. Thank you. We appreciate it. Pope Francis talking about potentially shaking up the Catholic Church by allowing married priests. Why now? That's next.